Hey guys, what is up? And welcome back to another exciting Photoshop tutorial. Today we're going to be learning how to use Camera Raw. So first things first, you have to be able to shoot in Camera Raw to be able to use this. So on your DSLR, make sure you're not shooting in JPEG. Switch your settings so you're shooting in Camera Raw. So let's get down to it. Let's toggle to lens corrections. And here, what I like to do in the beginning of any edit is enable lens profile corrections. And what this does is gets rid of your lens distortion. And right now it's not able to detect which lens I used, but that's very simple. What you can do is go to the make of your lens and it'll detect it. But if it doesn't, show up your lens, you can select it. There's a bunch of different lenses here. And if your particular lens, say you have a really old lens, you can try to find a very similar one in this menu. The result is pretty dramatic. My nose is very big here, and it remains pretty big, but, gets rid of a little bit of the distortion. Next, I like to click on this remove chromatic abrasion. It's a cool tool, and it's very subtle. Like when you use it, if you're far, you have to zoom in. That's why I zoomed in to 400 right now. What it does, it gets rid of like this weird color distortion, in hair and in clothing. So when you highlight that, it gets rid of that. And in CC, you have some more options to refine that ability. So right now you can't really tell, but it's really good, trust me, especially for printing. So let's go to the basic tools here. The first one is a very basic tool you probably used in Instagram. This is to change the coolness and the warmth of your image. And for this image, it's pretty balanced. It looks pretty balanced. So I'm just gonna leave it at 5,300. The next tool we have is the tint tool. A lot of times our pictures have this weird green tint or this weird magenta tint. So in this image, it's pretty balanced again, but I'm just gonna show you. You can make it really green, really purple. And for the slider controls, for any tool, just try to see the extreme and then try to see the other extreme of the slider to see what it's doing to your image, so you can get the result you want in between the both extremes. So for this image, yeah, one is good. Next, let's look at exposure here. My picture is already pretty bright. I'm just gonna bump it up a little bit. And right now, as you see, like the background, the highlights are blown out. It doesn't look too good, but we'll fix it. Next, basic contrast control. If you bump it down really low, all the contrast is gone. Bump it down really high, it looks like you're doing HDR. But for this image, I'm just gonna bump it up a little bit. And remember, this is all non-destructive editing, so that means you can go back anytime to this image and then reset all of these options. And if you mess up something, you don't like your result you get at the end, you can always toggle this menu up here and then just click reset camera raw default, and it'll go back to exactly how you shot the image without changing any of the things you changed. Let's now go to the highlight option. Usually I end up dropping the highlights to the very bottom, especially if I'm outside, just to get the detail in the background. For this picture, it's the sky. If you blow it out a lot, you like totally miss the Ferris wheel. But if you drop it down low, you can get, all the little rivets in the Ferris wheel and the blue behind the Ferris wheel. And then the shadows I like to bump up usually for all my images, because what you can do later on, 2 sliders down in the blacks, you can make the blacks darker. So this will, bring details out in the shadow areas, and then in the blacks you can just drop down. Don't push it too much where you're starting to lose a lot of detail, but a little bit so it's not like in this weird gray area. In this image, I'm gonna bump up the white a little bit because I feel like it's like under white looking right now. Everything's like personal preference, honestly. It depends on what you want. So I'm just gonna bump up the white. And the clarity, if you ever use Instagram, again, this is kind of adding structure to your image. It's kind of like sharpening, but not quite. I try to not bump it up too much if I use it. I'm just gonna put it at 5. I think that looks fine. And vibrance is good to bump up like skin tones, oranges and reds. And the saturation is good to bump up like blues and greens and generally all of the other colors. But for this image, since I'm the center of attention with my big nose over here, the lens correction didn't do much for that. we're just gonna bump it up a little bit just to make it a little bit more orange, more skin tony. And now this is let's go to this next menu, the tone curve menu here. And this is basically the RGB curves of levels, I suppose. And then here you can just further refine what you want to do. And for this image, I'll bump up the highlights a little bit. Let's bump up the lights a little bit, and bump up the darks a little bit, and then lower the shadows a little bit. And that's what we'll do for that. And then you can also use this menu over here. It subtly changes a little bit the lighting. Yeah, just experiment. Next, let's look at the sharpening. It's the third one from the left. And here, what I like to do right away, change the radius to 0.6. And this tool is really good, especially if you are printing an image, because when you take a picture with your camera, your picture doesn't tend to have any sharpening to it. So you have to add sharpening back to your image. And what you do next is you click Alt and you toggle the mask. And what it'll do, it'll add a mask to your image. So the areas in black are not sharpened, but the areas in white are sharpened. And usually you're gonna have to bump it up above 80 to get like a really good mask around your edges, because you don't want everything to be sharpened. Like right now, this would sharpen my skin and weird details that I wouldn't really want to be sharpened. So I'm gonna keep it around 90. I think that's good. So it subtly sharpens everything. If you're posting an image online, you're not gonna see too much difference. But if you're printing an image, this really helps. And depending on how sharp you want your image, try to keep it between 75 and 100. And to really see what you're doing, you want to zoom into like a place where there's a lot of detail. Like here, you'll see the difference between having no sharpness, and then if you add, you can see the difference right away. 70 is a little bit too high. I'm gonna drop it down to 60. But yeah, experiment with this. It's a very good tool to learn to use. Next tool here is noise reduction, and if you push it really high, it'll make your image really smudgy. And in this image, I don't really need to apply any noise reduction just because I'm outside and I shot at a low ISO. But just experiment with these tools. If you have a very noisy image, you can get rid of a lot of noise. But if you push it too high, you'll start smudging your image. Let me see if I can get it to smudge here. So as you see here, this is the preview of the noise reduction, like really high, and this is without noise reduction. So you can see the difference. It's really smudging my image and making it kind of like I painted over it. But yeah, you can use it for high ISO situations where there's way too much noise and there's not much you can do. You can save a lot of images using this technique. So let's go to our last tool here. I don't usually use the hue tool, but the saturation and luminance tools are very cool. So as the tool implies saturation, you can increase the saturation of all the colors in the red spectrum. So right now. So I'm gonna bump up the reds a little bit. And then the orange and yellow usually are good for skin tones. So I'm gonna just bump up the yellow or the orange. Just play around with the sliders to see what they do, and adjust according to like what kind of changes you want to make to your image. And this is really good for the sky. Say I'm gonna go down to the blue for this image. I'm gonna toggle this. You don't want to push them too much where the colors look fake. You want to just push them a little bit just to make the colors more accurate to what you remember that day looking as. Unless you're going for like an Instagram filter look, then by all means go crazy. And then I'm going to bump down the luminance, and what this does is basically the luminance of the color. If you go to the right, it'll make the color more bright, and if you go this way, it'll make it more dark. So for this image, I'm just going to bump it a little bit darker just to give it more detail in the blues, just make them pop a little bit more. And then for the reds on the carousel back there, or not the carousel, the Ferris wheel, I'm just gonna bump them down just to make them really bright, stand out. But it does make everything else a little bit too red. So don't push it too much. Just a little bit. I think that's good. And so yeah, this is our final result. This is what we started from, and this is what we have at the end. So you can save a lot of pictures just by using the basic tools in Camera Raw without even going into Photoshop and doing, editing there. So if you learn how to use this, if you understand, after a while, after experimenting with all the different sliders and tools, you can get a lot of great results and bring back a lot of pictures you thought you shot badly. So yeah, that's it for this tutorial, the basic techniques. I hope you guys learned a lot of different things, and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and comment. And I will definitely check out your comments. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Don't forget to favorite this video so you can reference back to it if you forget anything. So thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one.